Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. If 30-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, and on TikTok. Brothers and sisters, the time has come. This is the last Vinyl Monday of 2023. This will not be the last video you get from me this year, okay? We still have one more double album December to go. That will go up on Friday. Then I have a little Christmas treat for you guys planned. Then I will be taking a break for the holidays. I started off this year of Vinyl Mondays with this band, so it's kind of perfect that you guys chose for me to close the year with them too. This is the second of the audience pick albums. The people have spoken. The final Vinyl Monday of 2023 is Loaded by the Velvet Underground. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what the next album is gonna be. I host polls where you can pick what album I cover sometimes. You can find all of that on my channel. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress. I'm unsure of exactly what year it is, but it's got the purple cotillion labels and the 3-minute version of Sweet Jane. We'll get more into this later. And this was sent to my P.O. box along with almost all of my other Velvet Underground albums. Thank you so much to the patron saint of Vinyl Monday who blessed me with these albums. I'm pretty sure you'll be seeing all of them in this episode. So let's talk about this cover art. Apologies if I butcher this name, but the illustration on the front cover is by Stanislaw Zagorski. This is the Times Square subway entrance with either pink steam or smoke coming out. I love this art. It's so quintessentially 60s and 70s. It's like the makeup ads that you used to see at the time. It's like those illustrations. Now, if you look closely, you'll see the word downtown is misspelled as Dowtown. This has to be like an Odyssey and Oracle kind of situation where nobody realized the spelling mistake until it was too late and they couldn't commission anybody to fix it. I never noticed this. For years, I had no idea the art was like this because I'd only ever listened to Loaded on streaming services where the album art's like this big. I also really dig this font up top, super groovy. On the back cover, super simple design, just our track listing, credits, and this photo of Doug Yule playing the piano, taken by Henry Terre Hall. On Loaded, we have the late stage era lineup of the Velvet Underground, as I like to call it. That's Lou Reed on vocals, guitar, piano, and serving as principal songwriter, Doug Yule on vocals, guitar, bass, piano, organ, drums, and various percussion, Sterling Morrison on guitar, and Maureen Tucker credited on drums. We'll get to that later. Our special guests are Tommy Castagnaro playing drums on Cool It Down and Head Held High, Adrian Barber playing drums on Who Loves the Sun, and Doug Yule's younger brother Billy playing drums on Lonesome Cowboy Bill and Oh Sweet Nothing. Loaded was produced by Jeffrey Haslam and Shel Kagan with the Velvet Underground, engineered by Jeffrey Haslam and Adrian Barber. Roll transition. So a lot has changed since the last time we covered the Velvet Underground. We can just throw this whole lineup out right now because we're talking about a completely different band. The Velvet's sound changed a lot in 3 years. Gone are the days of European Sun, and in was this new folksier thing. Just as groundbreaking, just on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. We're more sad than mad. Oh, and all their gear got stolen, so they quite literally had to go acoustic. A lot of the material that would end up on Loaded was written in the back half of '69 on tour to support this self-titled record. They toured aggressively and made very little money doing it. That's the thing that happens when your last album underperforms commercially. 9 times out of 10, the tour isn't gonna do much better. This was a much recorded time in VU history, spawning quite a few live albums, including Live 1969. They're debuting some new stuff through this era. Sweet Jane, Rock and Roll, New Age. Those are 3 songs we are going to be talking about a lot today. They all came out of this tour. The Velvets scraped their funds together to hop in the studio and record what they had, and these songs quite prominently featured Mo. I think Lou had her sing I'm Sticking With You because his voice was a little too gruff to do it. As lighthearted as these songs are, there was a big problem that came up in these fall '69 sessions. Basically, Verve was sick of VU's shit. If you remember from the VU and Nico episode, the Velvets were delivered to Verve on the promise that they would be the next big pop group. Instead, they got VU and Nico, and a lawsuit over the back cover that got the album pulled from shelves for months. And when it was finally able to be distributed again, it came out at the same time as Sgt. Freaking Peppers. So VU and Nico never stood a chance upon release. This is the second time I've thrown that in like 3 minutes. On the one hand, Verve's patience is running out with the even more abrasive White Light, White Heat, and the total switch up that was self-titled. It didn't get much better. On the other hand, the Velvets were fed up with Verve too. They felt they were left high and dry after the VU and Nico fiasco and never really got the promotion they deserved. All this drama begs the question, why was Verve so desperate for a commercial success? It's because they'd been bleeding money for years at this point. I don't think they'd broken even since before they signed the Velvet Underground. They're also facing a bit of an image problem, thanks to having cutting-edge groups like VU and the Mothers of Invention. Verve had to deal with the effects of, well, being the edgy label. Songs referencing weed, drugs, not always easy to market. Around the time VU are recording their would-be 4th Verve album, Prez Mike Curb decides to let go of all the bands who reference the drugs in their songs. The official number of acts is 18, but in reality, only about 1/3 of those were let go for the express purpose of cleaning up the label. The rest just cost too much to support anymore. The Velvets were either dropped in this wave or left on their own accord. It depends on who you ask. Unfortunately, when they left, they weren't allowed to keep their masters. This included the recordings they made after the '69 tour, which would eventually become VU. The lost album, only lost through Verve's greed. Going into their new deal with Cotillion, it's pretty clear this is the make or break album. Morale is low, and the band needs a win under their belts to stay afloat. Richie Unterberger thought that, quote, even if it wasn't consciously thought of at the time, it was, this is our, being VU's, last shot with the group, and that we have to get that recognition we deserve. But it absolutely was being consciously thought of at the time. Doug Yule said Loaded's purpose was to get radio play. And Cotillions made it clear they expect as much too. This is how our album title came about. It's either an earnest attempt at an album loaded with hits as a fuck you to Verve, or a sweet little fuck you to Cotillion for expecting the same thing of them that Verve did. It's also a pretty obvious drug reference. Loaded sessions take place spring and summer of 1970 at Atlantic Studios in New York City. Aside from those songs they wrote on tour, most of Loaded, including the lengthier numbers like Oh Sweet Nothin', took shape in the studio. Sweet Jane picks up the pace, Ride Into the Sun is hashed out again with Doug on lead this time, and a little song called Satellite of Love has entered the chat. Though Doug was on album number 3, he wasn't really a part of it. He'd only joined a few weeks before it was recorded, so he wasn't in the position to contribute as much as the others. Loaded was different. Lou must have been in a good mood at the time because he took Doug under his wing. According to Doug, Lou leaned a lot on me in terms of musical support and for harmonies, vocal arrangements. He didn't like to be that under the spotlight for that long. He liked a break, and it was nice to be able to shift off onto someone else for a while. He called Loaded production Lou and Doug recreational recording. Aw, cute. Sterling was getting pissed off. He thought he was Daddy's favorite, and now the new baby is getting all the attention? Fuck that. So he starts to check out. Notably absent is Mama Mo Tucker. Where is she? Well, she's about to become a mama. Being a female musician in the 60s and 70s is a lot different than it was now. Michelle Phillips said in the Laurel Canyon doc that the 60s were a lot closer to the 50s than people remember, and I have to agree. There was no being a mother and being a working musician. Mo was faced with a dilemma. Do I continue being a working musician? Or do I start a family? For the time being, she chooses both, opting for a temporary leave starting in the winter of 1970, which meant that the Velvets had to hold off on re-recording I'm Sticking With You. They go ahead with the rest, though. Mo is credited as a player on this album, but she wasn't involved in production much at all. Instead, we have a few session players and Doug's kid brother Billy. For 9 weeks in the summer of 1970, the Velvets snag a spot as house band of Max's Kansas City. Max's was a club in New York City, an artist's haven that was massively important to the honest-to-goodness foundation of what we'd call punk here in the States. If you've been around here long, you know where and when I think punk started. It was here and CBGB that helped start the careers of the New York Dolls, Devo, the Dictators, the Cramps, the B-52s, Suicide, Television, Patti Smith, and most famously, the Ramones. During their residency, the Velvets sets were a mix of their old stuff as well as stuff that would be on Loaded. Oh, and by the way, did I mention Billy was like 16 at the time? What are you doing playing Max's? Don't you have a summer book report to write? Their tenure might have lasted longer had it not been for the night of August 23rd. Why did I say it like that? Why is this so dramatic? That night, a heavily pregnant Mo, if she got pregnant in January, then she's about to pop by late August, drops by Max's to see her band play. Across 2 sets, the Velvets played I'm Waiting for the Man, White Light, White Heat, I'm Set Free, Sweet Jane, Lonesome Cowboy Bill, New Age, Beginning to See the Light, Who Loves the Sun, Pale Blue Eyes, Candy Says, Sunday Morning, After Hours, Femme Fatale, and Some Kinda Love. So basically they played all their greatest hits, plus some odd ones out. Mo said she didn't hate the show, but quote, it wasn't the Velvets. She wasn't wrong. Listen to the recordings we have and you'll find they were functioning as a totally different band. Bridget Polk, an associate of Andy Warhol's, was also there that night. In a very Warholian way, she recorded everything that went on around her everywhere she went, just hours upon hours of these tape recordings. It turns out that Bridget, Mo, and everyone at Max's that night unknowingly witnessed Lou Reed's last gig with the Velvet Underground. After the set, he pulled Mo aside to let her know that by the time she returned, he would no longer be in the band. Quote, I knew something must have been terribly wrong, that he had to leave to survive the thing. After this gig, Lou quit the band 3 months before Loaded's release. I don't say he announced his departure because, well, Mo was the only one he bothered to tell. Their manager had to be the one to call up the rest of the guys and be like, hey, Lou's out, he's gone, he up and left New York. Lou would link back up with them over 30 years later, but for now, this departure was very sudden. Amidst the chaos, management allegedly called up John Cale to record for Ocean. Their logic being, hey, if Lou's gone, we can bring around people Lou hates. None of the remaining Velvets knew this happened, by the way. Ocean didn't make the final cut, but man, does this go to show just how much of a mess the end of production was if management is calling in people that got fired 2 years ago. Atlantic employee Danny Fields, that's a name we've heard before. I guess Atlantic is where he went after the Hudson's incident. Heard Bridget's tapes of Lou's final show. Those became the Live at Max's Kansas City album. Nothing beats the amp tapes, but you can at least kind of hear everyone on this one. Still not great audio quality, Bridget wasn't at the soundboard or anything, so you can hear full-fledged conversations through the quiet songs. Notably, Candy says, "The New York accents kill me." But who cares? The point of VU is not to be fidelious. Is that a word? It is now. Lou left VU partly because of how Loaded was shaping up. It's certain that he didn't approve of the final mix or track listing, as both of those were finalized after he left, and he couldn't have been thrilled that on the final draft of the jacket, he was credited third, after Doug and Sterling. The only person below him wasn't even there! What's a lot more murky is the claim that certain songs were edited after he left. Rock and Roll, New Age. The main point of contention was Sweet Jane. On original releases, my release, and all official releases of this album up until I think the 90s, the bridge was edited out of this song. Lou said it was done without his permission and that he was really mad about it, while Doug says that Lou did it to comply with the label's wants for a single. I know Lou was famously fickle, a known contrarian, but I just don't see him complying with a label like this. Whatever happened, Lou was pissed about it and had one of many fallings out with his ex-bandmates. The album was mixed and mastered without him. The track listing of Loaded goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Who Loves the Sun, followed by Sweet Jane. Next, Rock and Roll, then Cool It Down, and side 1 closes with New Age. Opening up side 2, we have Head Held High, followed by Lonesome Cowboy Bill. Then I Found a Reason, next Train Round the Bend, and the album closes with Oh Sweet Nothin'. Loaded was released in November of 1970 and stands as the last true Velvet Underground album. Squeeze doesn't count. Why doesn't Squeeze count? Because within months of Loaded's release, there were no original members remaining in the Velvet Underground. To recap, Nico fired in 67. She wasn't ever officially in the Velvets, but I count her because she was on the first album. John Cale fired in 68. Mo out on maternity leave for 1970. Lou's just pulled an Irish exit, and Sterling was the last to go. He pieced out in 71. So if Lou isn't in VU, what is he doing right now? Not much at all, really. He's moved back to Long Island and gone on kind of a 2-year sabbatical. He tries a solo album in 72 with some VU leftovers like Ride Into the Sun. This didn't really go anywhere though. So for those of you keeping track at home, this is at least the 3rd iteration of Ride Into the Sun. There's the instrumental, the Loaded Sessions version with Doug, and this with Lou. Anyway, the death toll for VU was Loaded's release. It did not perform well, failing to chart both in the States and in Europe, where they'd once had a pocket of devoted following. I'm making a habit of spotlighting a review from the time in every episode, so let's take a look at Lenny Kaye's review in Rolling Stone. I just paid for a Rolling Stone online subscription purely for access of their archive of reviews, and I am gonna use it, damn it! But don't worry, this Lester Bangs girly is also paying for the Cream archives. Anyway, Lenny identifies a certain je ne sais quoi VU always had. They're, quote, more loose and straightforward than we've yet seen them. There's an undercurrent to the album that makes it more than any mere collection of good time cuts, like the unexpected changes in New Age. He praises their back-to-basics approach with a twist, like on Rock and Roll, Head Held High, I Found a Reason, and identifies that Lou's golden ticket was writing about the New York everyman, specifically with Sweet Jane. That would be true for pretty much his whole career. The biggest flaw he cites is the production, but overall, he praises Loaded's mainstream appeal, saying if Atlantic fails to get a top 40 hit, they might think well of overhauling their entire corporate setup. While it may not have been the hitmaker everybody expected it to be, like the other 3 Velvet Underground records, Loaded played the long game with its legacy. The Modern Lovers, the New York Dolls, and Television can all trace their roots back to Loaded specifically, as can last week's record, David Bowie's Hunky Dory. Bowie was a big ol' fan, and when he went on his first American tour to support the man who sold the world, he made a point of going to a Velvet's gig. And mistook Doug for Lou. How the hell do you manage that? This painfully awkward interaction did not sour Bowie's fandom, though. He wrote Queen Bitch about Lou and regularly performed I'm Waiting for the Man and Sweet Jane. Later on, once Lou is finally ready to make his full comeback, Bowie assists in co-producing Transformer. It's worth noting in '72, Lou also had a quasi-VU reunion with John Cale and Nico. You know, the 2 people he fired from the band! Classic Lou Reed, if I've ever heard it. Anyway, what do I think of Loaded? Going in, the Velvets are one of my favorite groups of the 60s and 70s, and it has a lot to do with this period in their history. Looking at the holy scripture that is my Spotify likes, Pale Blue Eyes was my first VU song almost 6 years ago. So I knew Doug Yule VU before John Cale VU, which is probably why I responded to Loaded more than VU and Nico at first, which is weird because I love me a good crunchy sounding album. Want me to throw it one more time? I know, I shouldn't be tossing these around, but I'm just gonna throw it one more time for the sake of the joke. Whee! For those of you who will yell at me in the comments, I don't know if you've noticed, but all of my discs are always out of these covers every time I film, so I can just like toss these around with no consequences. Oh my god, we've completely lost the plot. Okay. Loaded, right? Had the potential to be the perfect VU album. They had a great body of work amongst everything they recorded during the Loaded sessions, but choices were made. And not always the best ones. Number 1, Ride Into the Sun should have replaced Train Round the Bend. That song just doesn't translate well on the record, and I also might be biased because Ride Into the Sun is one of my favorite songs Lou ever wrote. The outtake from the Loaded sessions specifically, with Doug on lead vocals, fit perfectly with the somber moments on this album. Number 2, this one is a little more controversial, and this one hurts my heart because I do like the song that would be replaced too. Okay, a Mo cut in place of Lonesome Cowboy Bill. I know there are probably some Lonesome Cowboy Bill fans clutching their pearls, or cowboy hats rather, but hear me out. There are plenty of Loaded outtakes stronger than this song, and Mo wasn't out of the band, she was just on leave. Even if she's not on the kit, I would have loved to hear a little something from her, maybe the bouncy Broadway duet style I'm Sticking With You released on the 45th anniversary edition. Related to the track listing, opening with Who Loves the Sun was a mistake. It's a great song, but it's just not an opener, you know? It might work as an album opener for another band, but not these guys. I know they're selling out here, but they're still VU. They need something a twinge more complex. Like Sweet Jane. That's an album opener. Standing on the corner, suitcase in my hand. We're back in the city. I'm getting ahead of myself. I feel like it would have made more sense to alternate Doug and Lou lead vocals with these first few tracks. Sweet Jane Lou, Who Loves the Sun Doug, Rock and Roll Lou. Lenny Kaye was right, the production is a little lacking, probably because they had so many people squabbling over this thing at once. Jeffrey Haslam, Shel Kagan, Adrian Barber, and the Velvet Underground. Way too many people in that chair. Where I noticed this weakness was the treatment of Lou's vocals. I'd never noticed this before poring over this album in such detail, but the vocal tracks sound a little distant. thin, metallic on Sweet Jane and Rock and Roll. Train Round the Bend was hindered the most. It's flat, plainer, lacking dimension the song needs. It's entirely unappealing to me. And third, or maybe fourth, I'm known for being bad at math. The bad choices I think we can all agree with, chopping up Sweet Jane, Rock and Roll, and New Age. These are three of the best songs on the album. Did we learn nothing from 3 Minute Layla? I'd only ever heard the 3-minute versions of these songs. Hearing them with chunks missing felt wrong. Most adversely affected was Sweet Jane. The loss of the bridge totally ruins the build into the coda. Alright, let's get into this thing. I'm gonna go roughly track by track, minus Train Round the Bend because I literally just talked about that one. Okay, let's go. Who Loves the Sun? It's far from the strongest song, but far from the worst. It's the most pop-oriented thing here. It's a pretty obvious grab at FM radio play. A cutesy little tune about everything feeling gray and drab after you get dumped. Who cares if the sun is shining? I don't even care if it's raining. This shit sucks. Lou handing this off to Doug was the right choice. For us to be able to take this song as straightforward and almost teeny bopper, we need a sweeter voice. Lou's snarl makes the songs about freaks and degenerates feel believable. Doug's the fresh-faced little brother singing about rain showers and flowers. But a running theme is established here, one Lenny pointed out in his review of Loaded. The twist. All the best songs here have one, and we get a little hint of that on Who Loves the Sun. It most often appears as a quirk in the song structure. Here, it's the beat switch with the descending harmony, like falling rains, some itsy bitsy spider stuff. I wouldn't even call it a bridge so much as a blip, but still, it's a taste of what's to come. Next is Sweet Jane. This is where the album really begins for me. As soon as we hear those twinkly guitars and acoustic riffage, we know we're in for something special. I'm surprised I don't bring this up more on Vinyl Monday, probably because I'm not a musician, but one of Sweet Jane's strengths is its chord progression. It's very open, a little off-kilter, but just bright enough to be palatable. Jack's in his corset, Jane is in her vest. These two were swapped on the demo version. Jane in the corset and Jack in the vest. My guess is Lou switched it up to put a more provocative image in our heads. Lou's greatest strength as a writer was how vibrant of a picture he could paint with how few colors he could do it with. Perfect Day is, what, like 15 lines long? And it's so evocative. Sweet Jane is different, but has that same quality, juxtaposing a merry band of freaks with gathering around a fire. Rebellion versus tradition, complacency. This is one of my all-time favorite Lou vocal performances. He's sneering, shivering, holding back laughter at times, little exclamations like "get ready" or "just watch me now." This song is weirdly joyful and the smiles are infectious. The bridge was a tragic loss. The backing vocals are charmingly off-kilter. Snappy drums played by, I think, Doug, builds this to a triumphant burst of energy. If you aren't shouting along to the la 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 la, you need an Alka-Seltzer and a nap because you are not well. This song is genius, one of the best songs to come out of all of 1970. Another note about this long version, my dog hates the truck brake noise in the beginning. It makes him go nuts. Rock and Roll, again, basic with a twist. The title would have you believe it's a straightforward rocker, and so would the first minute or so of this song. It's a simple 3 or 4 chord, if you count that transition, shuffle, and a deceptively simple drum pattern. The lyrics are about having an awakening, a 5-year-old hearing rock and roll music for the first time. Lou's squeals here, an almost gospel-like declaration of fine music. But here's the thing, I've never envisioned a 5-year-old when hearing this song. I've envisioned someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, discovering something right under their nose all along. This song is a lot more universal than it seems. We can all experience youth rebellion at any age. And Doug wailing on all those other solos, the last one especially, really took me by surprise. It's wily and skittery, a very new way of playing. I forget about Cool It Down, and I feel bad about that. It's not the strongest. The only parts that really grab me are the choruses, cool it down, and the piano solo. The guitars are almost southern rock-ish, which is interesting, seeing as southern rock was having a huge moment in 1970. Otherwise, it's just here to hold the pace. You can't go right from rock and roll to our next song. Oh Sweet Nothin' is the long one that gets the most attention on this album. Let's give some attention to the other one. We don't talk about new age nearly enough. All those reviews saying stuff like Lou left behind 2 masterpieces, Sweet Jane and Rock and Roll. Then what the fuck is this? It's like the slightly less sad child of Candy Says and Ride Into the Sun. Candy Says is cripplingly sad. Like, don't listen to that song if you're not doing well sad. This feels more nostalgic. Doug sings about the beginning of a new age, but from the tone, the feel of the song, we're only looking back, like a fat blonde actress past her prime. This song is really gorgeous, from the sparse piano to Doug's sweet vocals in the beginning, through the old school R&B, Something's Got a Hold on Me, to the rumbling, understated finale. This isn't as anthemic as Oh Sweet Nothin', but it's the necessary and equal opposite. Head Held High is rambunctious and fun, really great chemistry with the band on this one. Lou's doing his best old school rock and roller. Ever since I was a baby on my mama's knee. Doug is a star on bass, the vamping keys are a great addition. Again, another twist here. I don't know what the section is called, so I'm just putting it here. And who's that on the backing vocals? Because there is a voice in there that's not Lou, Doug, or Sterling. Lonesome Cowboy Bill, I dance to it. Doug sounds great. The guitars are doing some fun Chuck Berry style stuff. This one must have been a ball live. It's another obvious ploy for radio play. This one more obvious and slightly less charming than Who Loves the Sun. I Found a Reason is pretty, like a late 50s, early 60s slow song, especially with that spoken word bit that this period loved to use. I'm reminded of the Skyliners, the Flamingos, or a virtually unknown personal favorite of mine, Bertha Tillman's Oh My Angel. I'm addicted to the negative space in this song's production the same way. I Found a Reason really exemplifies the timelessness of this record. I don't always get to call the music I cover here timeless. Drum solos and Vox Continentals tend to date a song, but this could have been recorded in 2005 just the same as 1970. Oh Sweet Nothin' is perfection. Make no mistake, this is my favorite Velvet Underground song, but I'm not nearly as good as articulating why it is as I am with Sweet Jane. Who Loves the Sun might not be an opener in my eyes, but Oh Sweet Nothin' is a closer. It's the curtain call of a brilliant little band. I love how layered this song is. I can hear very faint bits of piano in the beginning amongst the subtle acoustic and moody electric guitars which play that oh so memorable line. The bass is prominent, great work from Doug. The lyrics are quintessentially Lou in the sense that they tell you everything you need to know in the absolute minimum phrases needed. This song is a big surprise. We slip into a jam in the back half. I like to imagine brothers Doug and Billy playing off each other in the studio. A jam is a side of VU that we don't usually get to see on a studio album, except for the deranged spiral of Sister Ray. The MVP of Oh Sweet Nothin' is that kid Billy Ewell. Lou said something along the lines of people who hold the original lineup sacred are silly because the lineup changed so much, but it was probably a lot ruder because this is Lou Reed we're talking about. And I have to agree. Mo's style is sparse, distinctly VU. She wouldn't have taken this song to the soaring heights that it needed to be, and that's nothing against her. About Doug essentially being written out of the history of this band. He was the MVP of Loaded. He pulls quintuple time as bassist, lead, and backing guitarist, singer, an occasional drummer, and pianist. That's That's 6, isn't it? Oh my god. The man was in at least 2 places at once. Loaded is timeless. Miraculously so, given its desperate attempt to play with the pop music of the day. It's still fresh today. It's 2020s, 2000s, 90s, and 70s all at once. This isn't some weary, belabored, dying gasp of air. This isn't selling out. It's resilience, a defiant curtain call. The Velvet Underground may have shot for the moon 4 times in their relatively short run, and missed in one way or another every time. But the Velvet Underground, and Loaded especially, is proof that if you shoot for the moon and miss, you land amongst the stars. My favorites on this one are Sweet Jane, Rock and Roll, New Age, Head Held High, and Oh Sweet Nothin'. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's the last Vinyl Monday of 2023. That was Loaded by the Velvet Underground. What do you think of this album? What do you think of VU? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, no matter what some guy on the internet might tell you, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11, and the third and final double album December goes up this Friday. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the end of the week. Bye!